When global media talk about Iran and the Strait of Hormuz, we hear only about oil tankers, geopolitical tension, and the radars of naval destroyers. This narrow artery in the Middle East seems like the most pragmatic, studied, and inhospitable place on the planet. But one need only look away from modern news reports and peer deeper into these sun-scorched lands, and a completely different reality unfolds. Ancient Persia is a crossroads of worlds, where great empires rose and fell for millennia, leaving behind artifacts and structures that defy modern logic. This region holds mysteries hidden beneath layers of scorching sand, in impassable mountains, and at the bottom of salty waters. From lifeless deserts concealing the perfect geometry of ancient traps, to anomalous valleys and the blood-red shores of Hormuz, whose nature science still cannot fully explain. Forget what you know about this region from modern history textbooks. We'll embark on a journey through the darkest, most inexplicable, and most astonishing mysteries of the Iranian plateau and the Persian Gulf. We begin our journey in the harsh east of Iran, amidst the scorched wastelands of the Sistan and Baluchistan province. It is here, beneath layers of salt flats, that Shahr-e-Sukhteh, the burnt city, is hidden. About 5,000 years ago, at the dawn of human civilization, a colossal Bronze Age metropolis flourished here, with a level of development that made it seem like a visitor from the future. The first and primary anomaly of this city is its absolute, total pacifism. In an era when ancient kingdoms drowned each other in blood and neighboring cultures in Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley created brutal cults of war, not a single weapon was found during excavations in the burnt city. No swords, no battle axes, not even arrowheads. There is also a complete absence of massive defensive walls. How could a vast, fabulously wealthy trade and craft center exist for centuries in a merciless ancient world without an army and without being plundered? This geopolitical mystery still lacks a logical answer, but archaeologists experienced a real shock when they began studying the burials of the local inhabitants. The level of local medicine is frighteningly modern. In one of the graves, the skull of a teenage girl was found with signs of a highly complex neurosurgical operation. Hydrocephalus was treated through meticulous cranial trepanation. Bone tissue analysis proved that the patient successfully survived the surgical intervention and lived for many months afterward. However, the most sensational find was a tall woman, likely a priestess or a seer, whose appearance in life must have inspired mystical awe. Inserted into her left eye socket was the first ocular prosthesis in recorded human history. It was masterfully sculpted from a lightweight bitumen paste, and the finest capillaries on it were engraved with gold thread. In the twilight of ancient temples, this golden eye, ominously reflecting the torchlight, undoubtedly made her look like a living deity. The inhabitants of Shahr-e-Sukhteh left behind another breakthrough. They created the world's first animation. On an unearthed clay goblet, they drew a frame-by-frame sequence of a mountain goat jumping for a tree leaf. If the goblet is rapidly spun on a potter's wheel, the animal literally comes to life, springing into motion. They created masterpieces of kinematics, performed brain surgeries, and crafted golden prostheses. But the finale of their civilization was grim. Inexplicably, the entire city completely burned to the ground 3 times. After the third, fatal fire, around 2100 BC, the survivors simply dissolved into the dust of millennia, taking their advanced knowledge into oblivion. Moving to the west of Iran, into the hot Khuzestan province, we find ourselves before an object that international experts rightfully call a masterpiece of creative genius. We are talking about the Shushtar Historical Hydraulic System, a giant engineering complex that completely shatters our understanding of the technological limits of antiquity. Imagine a colossal network of man-made canals, dams, aqueduct bridges, cascades, and giant tunnels. Not just built from stone, but literally carved inside a solid rock massif. The foundation of this cyclopean project was laid back in the 5th century BC, but the system reached its engineering apex during the Sassanid Empire era in the 3rd century AD. According to historical chronicles, thousands of captive Roman engineers and legionaries, led by Emperor Valerian, who had suffered a crushing defeat by the Persians, were brought in for the construction. The builders faced a task of incredible complexity: to tame the obstinate and powerful Karun River in order to provide the city with water and irrigate tens of thousands of hectares of arid land. To do this, they artificially divided the main riverbed, cutting a diversion canal through the monolithic rock. The water, passing through a complex system of locks and underground galleries, rushed downwards, setting in motion dozens of huge watermills grinding grain on an industrial scale. Visually, the Shushtar system resembles the set of a sci-fi movie, where the river acts as the main and only engine. But the main mystery of this hydrotechnical marvel lies in its astonishing durability. This giant machine carved into stone has been working non-stop for over a millennia and a half. It has survived the fall of great empires, devastating earthquakes, shifting climatic epochs, and countless wars, yet has not stopped channeling water through itself for a single second. We have reached the southern borders of Iran, where the land meets the warm waters of the Persian Gulf. Here, in the strategically important Strait of Hormuz, lies a geological anomaly that looks like a set for a movie about Martian colonies: Hormuz Island. As soon as you step onto its shore, the landscape changes sharply and terrifyingly. The ground beneath your feet, the coastal cliffs, and even the sea waves crashing onto the beach are dyed a thick crimson-red color. From a bird's-eye view, it seems as if the island is bleeding. For centuries, locals have used this red earth, known as gelak, as a spice for fish and even as a food coloring. Geologists, however, provide an absolutely pragmatic explanation for the eerie landscape. The soil of Hormuz contains an unprecedentedly high concentration of iron oxide. The mineral is washed out of the rocks, coloring everything around it in a rich crimson hue. Moving deeper into this patch of land, which covers an area of only 42 square kilometers, you encounter so-called salt glaciers. It is a paradoxical sight. Under the scorching Middle Eastern sun, where summer temperatures easily exceed 45 degrees Celsius, dazzling white crystalline mountains rise, visually indistinguishable from polar ice hummocks. These are salt diapirs, giant domes of crystalline salt that have been squeezed from the deep bowels of the earth to the surface under colossal tectonic pressure over millennia. Salt is everywhere here. It forms surreal caves where sharp salt stalactites hang from the ceilings and creates entire valleys that shimmer in the sun with all the colors of the rainbow due to impurities of various minerals and volcanic rocks. Leaving behind the crimson shores and salt domes of Hormuz, we return to the harsh reality of the central Iranian deserts. Life on these scorching plateaus has always been dictated by the presence of only one resource: water. To conquer this dead wasteland, about 3,000 years ago, the ancient Persians created an engineering marvel that is still hidden deep beneath the scorched earth. We are talking about qanats, a colossal network of underground aqueducts whose total length staggers the imagination. If you look at the Iranian desert from a satellite, you can spot strange lines of identical craters stretching for tens of kilometers. From afar, they resemble the aftermath of carpet bombing or giant ant hills. In reality, these are the ventilation and inspection shafts of an ancient underground water supply system. Lacking modern theodolites, laser levels, and drilling rigs, ancient engineers, the Mokannis, would descend into the foothills and dig deep wells, mother wells, until they reached an aquifer. From there, the most difficult part began. Underground, in pitch darkness, they manually carved tunnels toward the cities. The main secret of the system was a perfect, mathematically precise gradient of just a few degrees. If the angle had been too steep, the fast-flowing water would have eroded the rock and collapsed the tunnel's roof. If the incline had been insufficient, the water would have simply stagnated underground. The profession of a muqanni was one of the most dangerous in the ancient world. These men worked under the constant threat of cave-ins, the buildup of toxic gases, and sudden floods. It is said that before descending into a shaft, they often wore white garments, which would serve as their burial shrouds in the event of a tragedy. We head into the lifeless sands on the outskirts of the ancient city of Yazd. Here, atop two isolated hills, rise massive blank cylindrical structures made of stone and clay. They are devoid of doors, windows, or any decorations. These are dakhmas, the famous Zoroastrian towers of silence, places where an ancient religion defied death in a rather terrifying but absolutely pragmatic way. According to Zoroastrian teachings, the elements of earth, water, and fire are considered sacred and pure. A dead human body, however, is a vessel of impurity, seized by the demon of decay. Consequently, corpses could not be buried in the earth, burned, or drowned without defiling pristine nature. This created a complex theological and sanitary problem: how to dispose of bodies in a scorching climate without violating the laws of the faith. The Towers of Silence became the solution. Priests, performing the most gruesome work, brought the bodies to the flat, open-air roofs of these towers. The dead were laid out in strict concentric circles, men on the outer radius, women in the middle, and children in the very center. The bodies were then left under the scorching sun to be torn apart by flocks of predatory birds, primarily vultures and griffins. In the harsh desert conditions, the birds and the brutal ultraviolet rays stripped the bones of flesh in just a few hours. Once the skeletons were completely dried and bleached by the sun, the bones were thrown into a deep central well, or ossuary, inside the tower. There, they crumbled into dust over decades. Occasional rainwater washed this dust through a complex system of charcoal and sand filters deep underground, where it could no longer harm anyone. This tradition, which seems macabre to the modern eye, was practiced continuously in Iran for millennia. The towers functioned right up until the 1970s, when the government banned sky burials because expanding megalopolises had encroached too closely upon the hills of the dead. Today, these cyclopean arenas stand absolutely empty. There are no more priests or birds inside them, only the echo of the dry wind and a dead silence. Leaving behind the gloomy Towers of Silence, we descend into Yazd itself, one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world. In summer, the temperature here ruthlessly exceeds 40 degrees Celsius, and the scorching sand grits in your teeth. It seems physically impossible to survive in this mud brick labyrinth without modern air conditioning. But if you look up, you will see hundreds of tall rectangular towers with slatted openings at the top, piercing the sky above the flat roofs of Yazd. These are the Badgirs, or wind catchers, a masterpiece of ancient aerodynamics that allows an entire megalopolis to breathe cool air without a single kilowatt of electricity. The operating principle of the Badgir is ingenious in its physical simplicity and architectural complexity. The tower rises above the dense urban development to catch even the faintest breeze that is inaccessible at the level of the narrow streets. Streams of dry air enter the shaft, which is divided by internal partitions and are forced downwards. But this is only half the process. The real magic of thermodynamics happens in the basements of the houses, where the wind catchers often connect with underground channels, the very qanats we discussed earlier. The dry wind sweeps over the flowing ice-cold water of the underground aqueduct. Through the effect of rapid evaporation, the air cools swiftly, becomes heavy, and enters the living spaces. Simultaneously, the hot and stuffy air of the room is pushed upward through the opposing channels of the tower, due to the difference in pressure. As a result, a constant cool breeze is created inside the house, and the temperature drops by 10 to 15 degrees compared to the hellish heat outside. What is striking is the precision with which ancient architects calculated the height, the cross-section of the shafts, and the angle of the Badgirs' blades, relying solely on millennia of experience and intuition. These towers are not just ventilation pipes, they are perfect climate control machines with not a single moving part. Today, the world's leading technological institutes are studying the aerodynamics of the Yazd Badgirs to implement these primitive, passive technologies into the designs of modern, eco-friendly skyscrapers. We head to northwestern Iran, to the harsh Zanjan province. Here lies the Tuzla salt mine, where people have extracted precious white crystals for centuries. In the winter of 1993, a bulldozer operator cutting a new gallery in the rock unearthed something that made the workers cut their engines in terror. Staring at them from the rubble of rock salt was a human head with long white hair, a thick beard, and an elegant gold earring in its left ear. The police who arrived at the scene were convinced they were looking at the victim of a recent brutal crime. The facial features, skin, and even hair structure were preserved with frightening realism. But when the remains were sent to a laboratory, radiocarbon dating yielded an incredible result. This man had died over 1,700 years ago. Large-scale archaeological excavations began, and soon several more bodies were extracted from the salt captivity of Shehrabad, spanning the period from the Achaemenid Empire to the Sassanid era. They were dubbed the Salt Men. These unfortunate miners fell victim to sudden cave-ins that occurred here with frightening regularity. But the mountain didn't just kill them, it granted them a macabre physical immortality. The highly concentrated salt instantly drew all moisture from the bodies, completely halting the process of bacterial decomposition. Nature performed a perfect mummification, unattainable even by the great Egyptian priests. The level of preservation of the finds breaks all conventional archaeological boundaries. Scientists found leather boots that hadn't lost their shape in 2,500 years, brightly colored woolen trousers, iron knives in their sheaths, and even hair combs. Stomach analysis allowed for a thorough study of the ancient Persians' diet before death. The most dramatic find was a 16-year-old boy whose hands were thrown up in a defensive gesture, his face frozen in eternal anticipation of the collapsing roof's impact. These people were not rulers or warriors. They were simple workers, but it was the salt that made them the most eloquent messengers of ancient Persia to our modern world. Let's head to the sheer cliffs of the Naqsh-e-Rustam necropolis, located near the ruins of legendary Persepolis. Right into the vertical stone wall at a dizzying height, 4 colossal crosses are carved. These are the tombs of the great Persian kings of the Achaemenid Empire. They were created hundreds of years before the advent of Christianity, and the shape of the cross here is no coincidence. Following the strict laws of Zoroastrianism we are already familiar with, the bodies of the dead rulers were placed high in the rock massif, so that lifeless matter would in no way defile the sacred earth beneath their feet. But the most intriguing archaeological anomaly of this place is located not on the cliffs, but right at their base. In the middle of the dusty plain rises the Ka'ba-e-Zartosht, or the Cube of Zoroaster. This is a monumental rectangular building made of white limestone, constructed from giant blocks weighing tens of tons each. What is striking is that the stones are fitted together with micron precision without a single drop of binding mortar. The building looks like an absolutely impregnable, monolithic ancient safe. When large-scale excavations by the Oriental Institute of the University of Chicago began in the 1930s, archaeologists cleared a multi-meter layer of compressed sand that had hidden the lower part of the tower. The mysteries only multiplied. This cyclopean cube does not have a single real window, only eerie imitations, blind windows, carved from black basalt that seem to absorb light. The only massive entrance is located several meters above the ground and leads into a single, absolutely windowless room. Why did ancient engineers spend colossal resources on building this impenetrable box? the scientific world is divided. Some researchers are convinced that it was an elite closed Zoroastrian temple where the primordial divine fire was kept in absolute darkness, hidden from the eyes of ordinary mortals. Another theory sounds even more intriguing. The cube was the main state archive and a repository of relics. According to Persian legends, it was in this stone bunker that the original text of the Avesta, the main sacred book of Zoroastrianism, written in gold ink on 12,000 prepared cowhides, was kept. When Alexander the Great captured and burned Persepolis, this priceless archive was destroyed or looted, and the cube turned into an empty shell. There is also a third technological version. The location of the cube and the shadows cast by its corners at different times of the year perfectly coincide with the key dates of the Zoroastrian agricultural calendar. That is, it's not just a tomb or a temple, but a giant chronometer made of white stone. If this deep dive into the mysteries of Iran and the ancient East has given you a new perspective on its past, please give this video a like and be sure to subscribe to the channel. Many more unsolved mysteries of our planet await us. Thanks for watching and have a nice day.